Welcome to the first video in the series that we're doing on the world of 1500 Common Era. This one's about the major states and empires that existed during that time period, so the political geography. So in the big picture, by this time there were a lot of major states and empires that we would recognize today as being the origins of a lot of the major cultures and political organizations around the world. And that's why it's a great time to start talking about history in 1500 AD. The SOL objective that we're looking at is 2A, and we will locate the major states and empires of 1500 CE by creating a map showing those political boundaries. But first, let's get to the actual content so you guys will be ready to do that. And in order to put this content in a useful box, first we want to ask a bigger question, which is, does geography determine history? This is something that historians and geographers argue about all the time, so having you guys ask it is like bringing you into the fold of those professions. So let's look first at this idea, environmental determinism. And just to clarify what those words mean, to determine is to make certain or inevitable, like it's not going to change. And an ism, any sort of ism like determinism, is a set of beliefs. And we'll learn about religions later, and lots of them end in ism for that exact reason. But in this case, environmental determinism, environment determined. The idea that the physical environment of a place determines the culture of the people who live there. So let's look first at, these are ancient human migration patterns, as in, so we're coming out of Africa over here where the first genetic markers show up, and then here's the spread of human beings out and across the globe. And you can see that human beings travel crazy long distances, and even across seas here and over the land bridge between, this is Asia here and North America, and humans migrated down here because there was an ice age and you can actually walk all the way over here. So the problem was that after that period of migration when humans went all across the globe, there was isolation because the land bridge from Asia to North America was broken by the earth warming up. But only mostly. There's some evidence that people were coming over after that as well, though not very often. So then, just during this 1500 time period that we're talking about, the two halves of the world, North America, South America, and Europe, Asia, Africa, Australia, that whole other side, they're reconnecting. And that reconnection causes a lot of crazy things to happen, like the transfer of all these various animals and plants that had been isolated from one another for thousands and thousands and thousands of years. But possibly, most devastatingly for the human communities in both places, there were diseases that were transferred. And that disease transfer is one of the major shifts in history. And it was only because of the geography that even happened in the first place. So we'll look later at European colonization of the New World and how disease played into that, but recognize that geographically, those diseases occurred over here in Europe, Africa, and Asia because of various features of their society, and then transferred over here because of the first uses of technology to overcome the Atlantic Ocean's large distance. And that helped determine what happened in history. So environmental determinism kind of looks good at the moment. But people inhabiting the same places have differing cultures. So we said about disease that it devastated communities and definitely changed cultures, but we'll see over time that from 1500 to now, people who live in the same area and have the same resources end up having different cultures. So there's clearly more to it than geography. So why learn about historical geography if it's not the only answer? Well, because it helps us tell the story. And it can be used to analyze cause and effect of the events that we see in history. So in the time period that we study, 1500 to the present, maps and map making were incredibly important in Europe because Europeans were exploring across the world and saw lots of opportunities to make money and become powerful doing so. So let's talk about the empires. In Europe, you had England and France and Spain and Russia. In Asia, you had China, the Mughal Empire, the Ottoman Empire. Mughal Empire you might recognize as kind of like the word Mongol, and that's because it was descended from the Mongol Empire, which had spread out from Mongolia, which is north of China, and then all the way in and around that Central Asian area. And then you see the Ottoman Empire, I should note, had land in Africa and Europe too, so it spanned 3 continents, which is a pretty big deal. In the Americas, you had the Incan Empire, which is in South America, and the Aztec Empire, which was in what is now Mexico, in that middle Mesoamerica area. And then in Africa, you had the Songhai Empire, a trading empire below the Sahara Desert. And let's look at the map of that. So, over here, you've got the Aztecs, you got the Incas, and you can see the key down here. You've got England, you got France, you got Spain, you've got the Songhai Empire, you've got the Ottoman Empire, see how it covers these multiple continents. You've got the Russian Empire. This one also mentions the Persian Empire, which is right here, but that's not one I had on our list for the SOLs. And then you've got the Mughal Empire, which covered a lot of what is now India, and you had the Chinese Empire, which we still call China today. But regular maps are good at showing how things were at a particular point in time. They're like a snapshot. But they struggle to show change over time effectively. There's cool ways of doing it, but I found that video games are great for this. And so I'm going to display my nerdiness and use a video game for this video. All right, and welcome now to Europa Universalis 3. This is an expansion called the Divine Wind, but that's not a big deal. Basically, this is a really great opportunity for me to show you maps changing over time, and it's incredible that this game has been built. Let me just show you. So here's a map of the world. See how complicated this looks? That's because we're in 1399, and especially in Europe in 1399, this is before the time period we study, the political map was not very well defined by empires like it would be later. So you see that you don't even see Spain over here. There's these two different kingdoms called Castile and Aragon. And there's Portugal right there. And you see some that you might recognize, like here's France kind of, but it was a patchwork of different little states. And Germany was a patchwork of a lot of little states. There was no unified Italy. You had the Ottoman Empire, but it wasn't very big. And you had other Muslim empires down here, which would later be absorbed by the Ottoman Empire. Let's sort of migrate over here. You see the Timurids and you see Delhi. You don't even see the Mughal Empire yet. So that's interesting. Let's see if China's there. Oh, China's there. China is always there. The Ming Empire, which is the Ming dynasty of China. Let's see, 1399. I wonder what the New World looks like. Well, oh, you've got some North American Native Americans who we don't really talk about in these standards, but oh, there's the Aztecs. Little tiny Aztecs surrounded by the Maya and the Zapotecs, other early empires. And here's the Inca, who were already large and impressive. See, I already got a good economy score. Let's see, there you can see the Songhai Empire, but it was pretty small at this point, dominated by the Malian Empire. And there were other empires down in here, even down into southern Africa. So we don't get to learn about all the cool empires that were in and around here, these separate, interesting cultures, especially the Swahili. I think they're an interesting trading empire. Ethiopia is incredibly important. We'll learn more about them later. But let's go forward in time. And I can actually click forward in time by 1 year at a time. You can see some of the states changing around Europe. But that's a little boring, a little too slow. So let's go by decade. 1418, 1428, 1438. Keep clicking forward. Do you see how there are starting to be more and more sort of larger states, like France is unifying and England is up here being a boss? Now we're in 1518. So let's rewind just right up to 1500. And this is pretty darn historically accurate. So right in 1500, France is kind of unified. You got still these two separate kingdoms of Castile and Aragon. But realistically, they had been unified by Ferdinand and Isabella, who were the people who sent Columbus across, but technically still somewhat separate. The crowns hadn't been fully unified. And you do see in 1500 that there are already some Spanish colonies over here that were being held, in this game, technically by Castile. The Incas are enormous. The Aztecs have taken a lot more land. Let's see what's happening over here. The Songhai are slightly larger, and the Ottoman Empire is not that much larger. So that's interesting, because the maps that I was showing you earlier don't exactly reflect that. And that's because those are a serious simplification of where these empires were. In fact, some of it shows where they would be later. Then you get 1510, 1520. Let's go up to 1600. See how France is totally unified, and now there's a thing called Spain, and Spain controls all this crazy land. And if we come over here, Spain controls all of this land. So you see that these empires are changing over time, but the reason it's worth knowing what they were like in 1500 is just to know how different the world in 1600 looked. Spain conquering so much of that. And the Ottoman Empire, now look at them. They control all of that land. And they've taken over a lot of those other Muslim kingdoms that were in that area. See, Persia's over here. Now you have the Mughals in India, which are enormous. And the Ming China's still pretty much going. Got the Mongols, of course. Over here, you've got Japan, which is not fully unified at various points in time in history. But see, that's why this is interesting to me. Because then we can also flip forward to 1700 and see that there's been even more unification in terms of empires. The Ottoman Empire's in similar locations, but it controls a lot of land in Europe now. And Songhai is pretty much gone at this point, but Spain still controls an outlandish amount of territory over here. And you start to see the English colonies in North America, who you might recognize. We live right here. We live right there. But I won't bore you with too much more of this. I just wanted to share this with you. So, thank you for watching.